All right, let's get right into it. If you're a Linux user, I'm sure you've heard this a million times, that it's the secure OS, right? The impenetrable fortress that malware is afraid of. But is that actually true? Or is it one of the most dangerous myths in tech?
And this sentiment is everywhere. You see it all over the Linux community. And look, it's clever. It highlights that the user, you, are a key part of security. But it also perfectly sums up a huge myth we need to bust. A myth that honestly gives even really smart engineers a false sense of security. That quote isn't just one person's hot take. It really represents a whole collection of common and frankly pretty dangerous ideas that have popped up around Linux security over the years. Let's take a look at some of the greatest hits. Yeah, let's just go ahead and bust these myths right now. No operating system, and I mean none, is invulnerable. Believing any of this stuff can be absolutely devastating. The whole idea that Linux is safe just because it's less popular on the desktop or because the code is open source, that completely misses what the world of cybersecurity looks like today. So, let's talk about reality. Where does Linux actually live in the digital world? Because it's not some niche OS for hobbyists anymore, not by a long shot. It's the engine that powers the modern internet, and that makes it a very attractive target. Just look at this number, 98.5%. Let that sink in for a second. We're not talking about a simple majority here. This is practically a monopoly. Nearly every single major enterprise in the world relies on open source software like Linux. It is the literal backbone of business today. And think about where it's running. The servers for your favorite online stores, the cloud infrastructure that holds, well, everything, your bank's website. It's all running on Linux. So if you're a hacker, what makes more sense? Going after one person's laptop or trying to hit the server that holds the data from millions of people? It's a high-value, target-rich environment, for sure. On top of that, it gets complicated. The average big company isn't just using one type of Linux. They're actually running, on average, almost 2 different versions at the same time. And you know what attackers absolutely love? They love complexity. It gives them places to hide. And here is the great irony in all of this. The very thing that makes Linux so incredibly powerful and flexible that you can customize everything is also what makes it such an amazing playground for a skilled attacker. It gives them all the tools and freedom they need to cover their tracks and build really sophisticated attacks. So what happens when this perception, this myth of the invincible OS, crashes head-on with the reality of skilled, motivated attackers? Well, the data shows us there's a huge gap between what people think is happening and what's actually going on out there. Just process this for a moment. More than half, over 50% of businesses running their infrastructure on Linux had a security incident in the last year. This is not a what-if scenario anymore. It's a statistical probability. These attacks are very real and they're happening all the time. And what's really mind-blowing isn't just that these attacks are happening, it's why they're succeeding. It's almost never because of some brilliant movie-style zero-day exploit that nobody could see coming. Nope. The real reason is a lot more boring and way more preventable. Look at that. 76%. 3/4 of all breaches happened not because there wasn't a fix available, but simply because that fix wasn't applied. We're talking about a fundamental breakdown in one of the most basic security practices there is, just updating your software. And if that wasn't bad enough, here's the real kicker. Nearly 80% of these companies knew they were vulnerable. They were aware of the risk, but for whatever reason, maybe it seemed too complicated or they were worried about downtime, they just didn't act. And that right there is the critical gap, the gap between knowing there's a problem and actually doing something about it. So what's the big takeaway here? It's that security is not a feature you get when you install an operating system. It's an active, ongoing process that you have to consciously build and maintain. So let's talk about what a modern layered defense actually looks like. And we're back to the wisdom of Reddit. See? This user totally gets it. It isn't about finding one magical piece of software that solves everything. It's about building layers of defense. And that very first layer, the foundation of everything, is hardening your system. System hardening is all about reducing your attack surface, basically giving an attacker fewer doors to try and open. So you start by getting rid of any software or features you don't absolutely need. Then you close any open network ports that aren't being used. After that, you lock down all your user accounts with strong passwords and the right permissions. And finally, you make sure any way to get in remotely, like SSH, is as secure as it can possibly be. Every step closes another potential door. Okay, but let's be realistic. What if an attacker does find a way past your defenses? You can't just assume that'll never happen. And that's where your next layer comes in: detection. You have to have a way to see what's happening on your system in real time. And there are two main ways to do this. A host-based IDS, or HIDS, is kind of like a security guard posted inside one specific building, just watching for anything weird. A network-based IDS, or NIDS, is more like watching all the traffic on all the roads between the buildings. To get the full picture, you really need both. Now, this all builds up to something even more powerful: endpoint detection and response, or EDR. EDR is a huge leap forward. It's not just about getting an alarm that something bad is happening. It actually gives you the tools to investigate and, crucially, to respond to the threat, to stop it in its tracks before it can spread. But after all this, all the hardening, all the detection tools, all this advanced tech, it all relies on one final, absolutely critical component. And it's the one that most often gets overlooked. This quote from the Arch Wiki just nails it. It's the ultimate truth of cybersecurity. It doesn't matter if it's an engineer who decides not to apply a patch or a regular user who clicks on a sketchy link. Human action or inaction is at the heart of almost every security failure. The technology gives us the tools, but it's our awareness and our choices that actually make them work. So, as we wrap up, think about your own setup, whether it's your personal machine or the systems you manage at work. The operating system is just one part of the puzzle. The real question you have to ask yourself is this: what's the weakest link in your chain? Is it software that needs an update, a password you've been reusing, or is it maybe just the quiet belief that it'll never happen to you?